And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show, a very special Joe and Joe Weather Show. And you'll know in momentarily, Hurricane Ida over the Isle of Youth got better organized in a very quick way here today as it became a hurricane, and now we're going to be moving over Western Cuba and into the Gulf of Mexico and on its way to the great state of Louisiana. And we have New Orleans' own Bob Breck on with us tonight. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Best place to go for everything you need for your yard, for taking care of stuff inside your house. They got the best prices in town. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. And the website is omnitruevalue.com, and also Wholesale Holiday Lighting by Giannini, your complete holiday lighting specialist, meeting all your decorating needs, whether you are getting ready for the holidays and you want your house decorated professionally, or perhaps you want to do this as a business. Give them a call. They are at 162 Ocean Avenue in Lindenhurst, and their phone number is 631-957-5106, and the website is liholidaylighting.com. So here we are. We are a threesome tonight. On the bottom box is, of course, our Joe Rayo, who's here every night together, and on the upper left, the great Bob Breck, the legendary Bob Breck from WVUE in New Orleans. And now, you may be the former chief meteorologist, okay? You may be the former chief meteorologist, but I know that in the hearts of New Orleanians, after being there for the better part of 40 years, you're the king. You are the weather god in New Orleans.
I don't need to talk. Keep going, Joe.
I have the privilege, just a little bit quick background, 1983 to 1986, 3 years early in my career. I had just come from Corpus Christi. I worked with Bob Breck. It was a wonderful, wonderful 3 years that I had. It was, I guess, the only thing I regret about it is leaving it, because it was a wonderful town. And I, looking back on it, I had such a great time. And this man, led me along in a great way, professionally, personally, and he was very, very cordial when I contacted him last night. And I said, "Do you want to be on the Joe and Joe Weather Show?" And he said, "Well, the demands started. Makeup, who's doing makeup? Who's doing hair? Where's my cheese platter?"
It's not that bad, Joe. Now, come on.
No, it's not. It's great. It's great.
What you must tell people, though, when you were in New Orleans, probably the only time of your career, maybe not. Do you remember we were on a billboard?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
We were on a billboard. Yes.
Well, out by the airport.
That's right. Right off Airline Highway, where Jimmy Swaggart used to hang out. Remember?
That's right. Amen. Praise the Lord.
Oh, yes. Yes. He was on a first name basis on every hotel on that strip.
Saving souls.
Yes. So also a big welcome, by the way, to the folks watching from New Orleans and from Southeast Louisiana. We're glad to have you here. We cover these storms. We cover these storms, Bob, wherever they are. And as soon as when I saw what was going on the last few days, I said, I have to get Bob Breck on. So to give us a sense and insight. Katrina, we're coming up on the anniversary of Katrina. Now, I wasn't there, obviously, in 2005. I remember covering it from my vantage point here when I was working at WPIX. I always say that every area has its sort of generational storm. And when I worked in New Orleans, Bob, I remember everybody used to say Betsy, Betsy, Betsy from the mid-1960s, because that was the generational storm that flooded New Orleans and wreaked all sorts of havoc. I imagine that the imprint that was left by Katrina still stings pretty hard.
Well, Joe, but you have to understand, every time there's a bad storm, usually society pitches in and allows the city to get better. So when Betsy came, it created the levee system that the Corps eventually built up, but unfortunately Congress only funded it piecemeal. So they built the levee system on the cheap. And when Katrina came, that's why the levees failed. It wasn't that Katrina was this massive storm that we'll never see in our lifetime, but maybe it was. But it was like, had the levees been built the way they are now, I mean, they've been built up way better. There's what's called T-walls instead of eye-walls. They're using clay instead of sand. It was so much on the cheap back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I'm surprised we didn't have the levees breached before Katrina, but we were just fortunate. Now, since Katrina, though, money's been funneled in, and I think we're really a whole lot safer. And everybody's freaking out with this one, but I'm feeling good about it. I think if we can get the Eyewall just a little farther westward, the city's going to fare okay. I know they're telling everybody to prepare for the worst because they don't want to tell you we're hoping for the best, because that's what I am. I'm hoping that it goes west and we avoid that Eyewall. We'll be on the right side, the stronger side. We'll get a lot of rain. We'll get some surge, but avoid the Eyewall.
The western part of your state has been hit particularly hard these last few years.
They don't need it.
The Southwest Louisiana, I mean, have they even come back from Laura? My understanding is that
not Lake Charles.
Not around Lake Charles.
Lake Charles is still a wreck. I think Lafayette wasn't hit as bad. So they've come back quite a bit. But Lake Charles is, boy, they can't take another storm. It's sad. And you wonder about how does Mother Nature work? I remember this was after you had left back in 1995. Pensacola had gone 69 years without a direct hit. And in 1995, they had two major storms hit them that summer. Opal being one of them. I forget what the other one was, but it was like, that's, Mother Nature is kind of freaky at times.
Oh, yeah. Joe, let's get Joe Rayo into the conversation. Bob, Joe, I was telling you off camera, and by the way, I got all the maps ready to go, so we can, we'll be doing a little weather here shortly. Joe and I have known each other. It's kind of a funny thing from the time that we were even as it turned out, we lived within blocks of each other but we never met until I was 20 and Joe was just slightly older, 22. But from when we were little, we actually, both born in East Harlem, both went to the same grammar school. I didn't have Mrs. Quinn. Joe had Mrs. Quinn. Mrs. Quinn. When Mrs. Quinn died, Joe wanted to go to the wake just to make sure that she was actually gone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I said that. My grandmother was very upset with me. She said, you're supposed to have a better, of the dead, you're supposed to have more respect. I said, not with Mrs. Quinn. Please get away from me. As I said, Bob doesn't know. Bob, to best describe Mrs. Quinn, she was a hybrid of Elvira Gulch, who rode the bicycle in The Wizard of Oz, and Maud, Beatrice Arthur's portrayal of a housewife, the cousin of Archie Bunker. She was kind of like that kind of character, and she was not very well liked among all of us. I had her twice in kindergarten and also in the second grade. So, but let's not dwell on that. Let's dwell on what's going to happen here.
Go ahead, you go. I'm going to get some maps ready while you guys talk.
I posted on my Facebook page earlier today how amazingly similar the tracks are between Camille of 1969 and this storm, Ida, coming our way in the next few days. Both storms passed across the westernmost part of Cuba. Admittedly, Camille took more of a turn to the right and hit Mississippi, Ida will be a little bit further to the west or to the left, but still, look at Ida, look at Camille, look at Katrina, for goodness sake. They all fall in the same time frame, the middle to latter part of August. The waters right along the immediate shoreline of the Gulf Coast, 88 to 90 degrees. There is no question, at least in my mind, gentlemen, that, and I've often said that I'm just a general practitioner in weather in terms of forecasting. I'm not a hurricane expert. I'm not a severe weather expert. I'm not a long range weather expert, but I do look at past historical events. And when you look at Katrina and you look at Camille and you see where Ida is going and the water temperatures and everything else, there's no question in my mind this is going to be a Cat 5 at one point or another for however length of time. And both in Katrina and Camille's case, peak winds of 175 miles an hour. It would not be at all surprising to me if that were going to be the case with Ida, wherever Ida happens to hit.
Well, I think that is you're right on, Joe. The question is, when will that happen? And I think it will happen right where Katrina took on the Category 5 when it passes over the loop current that comes out of the Yucatan Channel.
Right.
Yeah, let me bring up, I got a graphic that I had yesterday, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. I don't know, Bob, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it unless you have the YouTube show opened up on your desktop. But I got the Gulf water temperatures and plotted the track, because the Hurricane Center talked about this very large warm eddy that's in the Gulf, and it's very clear. The track is right over that warm eddy on the center of the picture down at the bottom, where you see the
That
purple.
warm eddy is there every year.
Yeah.
That is the Gulf Stream.
Yeah, and also you can see down in the center would be right around the Yucatan Peninsula, where Hurricane Grace upwelled some of the water. So the water there is much cooler, but Ida's going to completely avoid that. And the other thing is, because we're at the end of August, as Joe mentioned, the shelf water temperatures, which if this were the end of September, you could pull a whole bunch of hurricanes, and I can remember a number of times that I'll mention in the discussion how the water temperatures near the coast are much cooler than they are offshore. And oftentimes you get these storms, they'll come up, they get into that little cool area right before they make landfall, and it knocks them down a peg or so. But we're at the peak here, and the water temperatures there right along the Louisiana coast, surrounding Boothville and going all the way around, right around 90. I mean, this is going to be problematic, particularly if it winds up slowing down as predicted, just as it starts to get north of 28 degrees north.
Are you trying to scare people, Joe?
No. I'm not at all. But I mean, this is on the table.
It's just physics. It's basic physics.
Yes.
I'm wondering sometimes whether or not bringing in the term political, whether or not the folks over at the Hurricane Center say, okay, behind the scenes, they say, look, we know this is going to be bad. We know this is going to be probably a Cat 5. We know this could be the equivalent of a Katrina or a Camille, but we don't want to say that now. And they try to they try to make it as bad as they possibly can, but not make it as we're discussing right now with the taking into account the warm eddy and the loop current and everything else, the possibility that this may be another storm equivalent to those two historical storms in the past 50 or 55 years.
Well, the storm's not even in the Gulf yet. It's still over Cuba. And the thing is, it's moving fairly quickly, that there will not be much time to, number one, there won't be enough time to evacuate the city. So there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to be left behind. But as I pointed out, the levees are so much better now than what they were. So I'm confident that the people inside the levees are fine. The people outside the levees know enough that they don't stay. So the loss of life, I don't think is going to be that high, aside from the Darwin people that just got to go out and check their boat in the height of the storm or something.
Right.
You can always have a couple of those, but again, my perspective, going back to Katrina, when it was coming up, Joe, it had this massive eye structure with the donut shape. The ring, I mean, it was what an eye wall. If you can avoid that eye wall, it was like night and day in terms of destruction. If you got in that eye wall, I mean, the trees were flattened, poles were down. It was just phenomenal. And then you go 10, 15 miles away outside the eye wall, and a couple of tree branches, but not anything like that kind of destruction. So I know the Hurricane Center said this is going to be a big storm. It's going to be massive. And it's that eye wall that I want to avoid. That's, to me, the critical part of the storm.
I had a professor at the same college that Joe went to, Professor Jerome Spar, who was revered in many circles as a synoptic meteorologist and forecaster. And he used to refer to the eye wall as the Colosseum of clouds. He said that's the worst place you possibly could be, is anywhere near the Colosseum of clouds, which I presume was the periphery of the eye wall that you just spoke of. And absolutely, you do not want to be anywhere in that vicinity when a storm is making landfall. I was kind of surprised, Joe, that the Storm Prediction Center only has near the point of landfall a marginal risk. Maybe they'll build on that in the next couple of days.
I'm sure they will.
But it's almost a given that they're going to have to issue, any kind of a wide open area along the Gulf Coast ahead of the storm's landfall, especially on the right-hand side, a tornado advisory or discussion, because there always has been, and always will be an outbreak of tornadoes, especially with a storm with the potential of an Ida coming their way.
By the way, Joe, I can't see the chat board, so if you could monitor the chat board, it would be great. For those of you who are on tonight, if you've got any questions, certainly go right ahead and just put them on there, and hopefully we could get to them. Interestingly enough, Bob, I got the U.S. satellite loop. I'm going to bring up the close-up floater, and you're seeing. We talk about when you ever see these storms, when they start to get in the mode with strengthening, you see that feathering of the clouds in the outflow. Definitely looking at the wider shot, the circulation of this thing has really expanded during the day today. I mean, there's high clouds that have pushed all the way up into coastal Georgia and South Carolina. And the other thing that's happened is, on the lower left, you've got Nora on the Pacific side that's making a line for the Baja Peninsula. And we were talking yesterday about the fact when you look at some of the earlier tracks with this, which were taking it more on a westerly track and more toward the Texas coast, you would have to look at this and say that the outflow from Nora would have probably created some shear overhead. But that the more northwest track has basically put Ida in this zone where it's far enough away that it's going to avoid that shear. And then you had, there was this upper low sitting off the North Florida coast that has moved westward and is now very weak and sitting over you, where it's producing clouds and probably some showers and storms, and that's moving westward too. So, you have a really almost classic good outflow setup with this. Once it clears that west coast of Cuba, everything on paper says it should strengthen rapidly during the day tomorrow and into tomorrow night.
I think Joe's spot on. This is probably going to be a 5. Will it shock me? No. Could it stay a 5 to the coast? I just find that these major hurricanes have tough times maintaining that 5 intensity for more than 8, 12, 15 hours. And you've heard of the Eyewall replacement cycle. Stuff starts happening. And so is it going to be a strong storm? Sure. When Katrina came ashore, it wasn't a 5 anymore. It was barely a 3.
Right.
But the surge And people say, well, surge was 28 feet. No, I went over to Bay St. Louis and Biloxi afterwards. There was a fuel tank from the Gulf or the Biloxi Marina that was up on Interstate 10. And I don't know if you remember, there's quite an elevation of maybe 25, 30 feet. This tank was up on the highway. So that surge was more than 28 feet to get that tank up there.
Oh God, yes, I remember. I remember clearly. I remember clearly. Yeah, the surge is going to be a big deal. The other thing is when you bring up the point about the storms not coming ashore as a 5, the reason why Camille managed to come across as a 5 was because it was moving at over 20 miles an hour when it was when it headed to Mississippi. If they've got a solid forward motion, it delays even by a couple of hours. It'll delay weakening because that circulation starts to get overland, and when part of the circulation is overland, when they're moving slowly, it does tend to cause the storm to deteriorate somewhat. So that might compensate for the fact that you've got this thing moving over that warm shelf water. That if it slows down to 12 or 10 miles an hour before landfall, that perhaps with most of the half the circulation on land, that you'll start to see the core of the storm maybe deteriorate a little bit. But we're fine tuning here. It's not even there yet, and we're fine tuning. So we got to be careful about trying to figure out these little nuances 2 days in advance.
Hey Bob, you were we have somebody on the chat board here who said that his name is Jeffrey Gaudet. I believe that's how you would pronounce it. He said, "Good to see you here Bob Breck. Met you when I was in kindergarten in the 70s, and I still trust your predictions. How do you all think?" And I hope I pronounce this correctly. The Ponchatoula/Hammond area will do.
Very good. He got Ponchatoula.
Ponchatoula.
So I'd like to show him Chapatulas. Some of the names around here are kind of different.
Well, it's like being on Long Island, and we have to, people look at Happague and Happague, and it's Hauppauge.
Even John Coleman, when he was on the Weather Channel doing an update, and he said, not the Weather Channel, he was on ABC Good Morning America, and he says, and the 4 inches of rain that fell in Islip, New York.
Well, that's when you don't know the local area, and it takes time to learn all these nuances. I started out in New Orleans not knowing the cities, and I'm on the air back in 1978, first week on, and I said over at what looks like it's supposed to be Pass Christian, and I come back and the anchor news director says, "Bob, you'll learn, but we have funny names around here. It's Pass Christian, not Pass Christian." That's okay. I'm gonna learn, but it took a long time. We had a lot of learning.
The reason why I bring Jeffrey Gaudet's post up, though, Bob, is you've obviously been there in that area for a good many years, and I'm sure that a lot of people will hang their hat on whatever you say in terms of a forecast, especially one of as important as this. But I'm just wondering, when Katrina came around in 2005, did you feel any pressure knowing that anything that you say will be taken as the gospel by millions of people, or at least many hundreds of thousands of people who are watching your particular television station and saying, "Man, I hope I don't up with this"?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stress, Joe, as both of you remember how when you're on the air, it's really, you're trying to look Mr. Calm and act as if, well, I got this under control, but inside you're all the knots, and you're trying to put on a good game face. And when Katrina was coming, I knew it was a problem when our local weather, National Weather Service office put out a statement that said there will be neighborhoods that will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps months, after Katrina. And I said, God, that's scary. But I said, maybe if I quoted him on the air, that would get people to evacuate.
Right.
And so I did. And afterwards, you know, when the social scientists come by, they figured out that 92% of the people that lived here evacuated. 8%. Okay, of that 8%, probably half, maybe they didn't have cars, they didn't have transportation, they couldn't evacuate. And then you're always going to have the 4%. It'll curve at the last minute. I'll ride it out. And then we had how many? 1,800 died, drowned. It was you felt good, so many got out, but you felt bad because you had such a high loss of life. And I don't feel that's going to be the case here because of just the way the Corps of Engineers was embarrassed by Katrina. When they rebuilt, and they had $14.5 billion, Joe, to rebuild the levees, they did it the way it should have been done the first time. So I feel pretty good. There's some weak spots. It's not totally secure. I always remember and you wouldn't allow me to say it on camera, but one of the Corps of Engineers, I don't know, they're not presidents, but the chief guy at Corps of Engineers, I says, you feel good about the levees? He says, there are two types of levees. There's the one that will fail, and the one that has failed, and the one that will fail. That's how you got to look at it. Two types of levees. Either they've already failed or they're gonna fail. So he's telling me, even though they built it right, there's still always the possibility a levee under the right circumstances can't hold up to the force of water.
And people need to understand too that those of you that are, I know I see there's folks on the board that are from Southeast Louisiana, so I'm preaching to the choir when I'm going to say this. But for everybody else, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of Southeast Louisiana is below sea level, and that makes it a little tougher in a situation like this.
And Bob, Stephanie Young on our chat board says, we trust, and in big block letters, Bob, period. So that must make you feel very, very good, I think.
Well, I worked hard for 38 years on Fox. Well, it wasn't Fox 8 all the time, but it was Channel 8. It never worked for another channel. And I always thought, Joe, that knowledge plus experience equal trust. And over time, you earn that trust. It doesn't mean you can lay back and now say, hey, I don't have to keep earning your trust, because you do. And I tried very hard to earn their trust. And I think what people miss.
Well, you succeeded. You succeeded in that.
The people who are currently on the air, hey, they're all really good communicators. And I'm sure you see that up whether you're in New York or Georgia. They're class. I mean, they speak well. But you know what they do? They just take what the Hurricane Center says, and they've got all these great graphics, and they just go through them. Okay,
Correct.
I'll switch to another channel. It's the same thing, the same graphics, Correct. The same.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you've noticed, Joe, where do you see them say, oh, did you see this on the satellite picture? And point out a feature.
Right.
That it looks like to me that thing has shot out a little more towards the west instead of going towards the east. They cannot go against the Hurricane Center. And I never went against the Hurricane Center. I always presented their facts. But I often would say, and I remember one storm, they had curving right into New Orleans. And I said, this thing is made a little jog to the right. It could be turning the other way. I didn't say it was. I pointed it out. Well, a couple of advisories later, the Hurricane Center admitted it's not going west.
Right.
These people, they're putting stuff in the models. All the faith goes in the models. But where is that human touch? You don't have it anymore.
Right.
No,
we said this last week when we had our own atmospheric hemorrhage to deal with Henri. And I said, talking with Joe on our show, and I said, you know, the one thing that is the difference between somebody like Joe or myself, who have been in this business, and you too, Bob, for many, many years, and somebody who's up and coming, young, knows their stuff, very good communicator, but does not have the background of empiricism, does not have the background of seeing a storm. Let's say what I posted this morning, the similarities between this storm's path and Camille. They weren't around. They probably weren't born when Camille was here. I was. I remember it. I was a teenager, but I certainly remember it. But there's also comes a time when you have to stop looking at the models, stop looking at the GFS, the NAM, the European, and say, let's put it all aside. Now it's time for now casting, not forecasting. It's all in front of you now. The radar, the satellite, landfall in about 6 hours or less. You stop looking at the models. I don't care what the NAM says. The NAM is just basing it on what it thinks it's going to happen 6 or 12 hours from now. Now you have to look at the maps. You have to look at everything. And I'm sorry to say, and I did this almost like at least 2 or 3 times a day when I was working at a private weather service back in the 70s and 80s. I haven't plotted a sectional. God, I remember how the loss of doing a sectional. I just you by doing it, you just see and you feel. You have that gut instinct as to what is going to be taking place. I apologize for the fact that I've not done a sectional. I am relying a lot on the stuff that's coming out now automatically on the internet and on maps and everything. But again, there comes a time when you have to base all of your prior experience on something that's happening right now casting. And again, I find that a lot of the young people who you see on television in many cases now, they're not doing that. They're just, as you just said, they're just reading off what the Hurricane Center is saying. And again, I said, we're all just general practitioners, but there does come a time when you have to inject a little bit of personal, your own information, your own empiricism based upon your experience as to what is going to happen. And sadly, that doesn't seem to be happening much anymore. They just stand there. They look very nice.
Oh, they look great.
They look great, but they just don't have. They just. I on a couple of occasions I was at AMS conferences, and I'm sitting there, and I'm watching some of the people coming out into the television world. And I saw one tape that this young person did. She was showing a bullet box, right? A bullet box, 3 or 4 different things about the main thing about her. And she read every single thing verbatim. And I said, I could read that for myself. Why don't you inject something in each box that you feel is different? And I said that to this person. I said, you did a great job. You're a great communicator. But next time, don't read verbatim. You're not a robot. And interact, talk as if you're talking to somebody, one-on-one. They don't do this anymore. These broadcasts. All right, I've done enough of a rant. I'm sorry.
All right, look, hold on.
Reverend Joe.
Yes, the Hurricane Center's new advisory is out. So why don't I had it here on the screen. What did I do with it? Oh, here it is. The 8 o'clock advisory is out. So let's put this up. And the forecast is from the 5 p.m. advisory. Excuse me. It is at 22.4, 83.5. So it's right on the right over Western Cuba now, just coming ashore. Top winds are 85 miles an hour. I'm sorry, top winds are 80 miles an hour, moving northwest at 15. That's a very narrow strip there in Western Cuba, so it'll probably be offshore in about 4 or 5 hours at 15 miles an hour, and then it's on its way up into the Gulf of Mexico, and then it's just going to be a matter of just watching to see what the recon comes back. And speaking of which, there is a reconnaissance aircraft there right now, and it looks like to me that they closed off, over the Isle of Youth, there were some 64 to 83 knot flight level winds. It's gone north over Cuba. And by the way, that's something that's recent, because Bob and Joe, we both remember, because they only started doing this back a few years ago, where if there was a storm over Cuba or near Cuba, you couldn't fly into their airspace, so you were just kind of in this sort of void.
No man's land.
Yeah, in terms of information. But after Irma, I think that they kind of, watching satellite loops of the eye of Irma literally bouncing. Oh, that was one of the most incredible things that I've ever seen, was to watch the eye of Irma literally bounce off the north coast of Cuba like a ping pong ball, hitting a table and then just bouncing up and then hitting it again. It was astounding to see that. It's just so dramatic. And now the plane's coming down the other way. But I'm just looking at some of the winds on its first pass, and it looked like the center was just about going on shore. So we'll see what happens when it comes out the other side. The guidance, the intensity guidance late this afternoon. This is the 18Z guidance, and the Hurricane Center mentioned, did say this in their discussion, that the vast majority of the intensity guidance now has it either as a Cat 3 or a Cat 4. In fact, most of the models actually have it as a Cat 4 versus a Cat 3. So that guidance has been going higher and higher with every run. And in terms of the track, interestingly enough, on the hurricane track model track guidance, there are two outlying models, Bob, that have it, I would say probably between Lafayette and Lake Charles. Then there's a whole bunch of them that are clustered between, I would say the western part of New Orleans and then going back toward Lafayette. That seems to be where they're all clustered right in there. And in terms of timing, you got one of them that's much slower than the other, but it somehow ultimately gets to the same place. But the track model guidance, though, is at least leaves you with some confidence that in terms of the forecast and trying to zero in, that it looks like the eye is going to pass west of New Orleans.
Well, that's where I'm a big believer. The Hurricane Center, because of the social scientists, did away with the center line track. And I said, that's really stupid, because for 38 years, I educated my viewers on following that center line track, because how are you going to know where the Eyewall is going to be if you don't follow that center line? Now, to give you an idea, the Hurricane Center's last three forecast tracks all look pretty much identical, unless you get down. They've got a little icon you can click on their website. It's the interactive.
Right.
And you can get really down close where cities pop up. And so that's what I put on my blog, how that track, it might only shift 10, 15, 20 miles because the Hurricane Center doesn't usually make dramatic shifts. But it gives you a sense, a trend, that they keep moving this thing farther westward. And they've done that on the last three. Earlier, they had it over Houma. Then they moved it over between Houma and Morgan City. And this last one, now it's right over Morgan City.
Yeah, I'm actually bringing that up. I got the interactive map is up on the screen now. And let me click a few boxes here so I'll put the track. Yeah, it's in Morgan City to Baton Rouge on the right. Latest one.
Now, Joe, if that trend is real, and you said there were two other models that kind of headed even farther west. Yeah, what if that trend is real and it keeps going a little farther and a little farther? It could end up over at Lafayette, and the people in New Orleans who have, they scared the bejesus out of all of them here. They're going to say, what'd you do that for? Now, I understand it's not an exact science. It's not astronomy. But I think sometimes they just are so convinced about the models that they want people to believe that the models are infallible, and they're not. You saw with Henri, they struggled. They struggled.
And so did we.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, and so did we.
Joe, isn't Joe and Joe. That's our guidance, right? That's what we look at too. It's
Right.
not like we don't look at that. But I just think people just rely on the models to extremes.
And also, a mutual friend of ours, Bob, a very good forecaster on television in the 70s and 80s, Alan Casper. And sometimes,
Alan.
and sometimes we had situations in the wintertime with snowstorms, and there were a lot of snow weenies out there who want snow and others who didn't want snow. And Alan, on more than one occasion, would say, sometimes you have to forecast with your heart, with your head, and not with your heart. And last week, and Joe will back me up on this, there were more than a few people on Facebook and other social media sites saying that Henri was going to curve into New York. A couple of them even said it was going to curve as far west as Toms River, New Jersey, talking about, heading up toward White Plains,
Right.
up in my neck of the woods. And meanwhile, the most reliable models, such as the GFS at the time and also the European, were saying no, Eastern Long Island or maybe even Rhode Island. And you start pulling your hair out because some people are saying one thing and other people are saying the other thing. And you're right. Those models for a good long time last week with Henri were struggling. In fact, I even made the comment to Joe, it seems like the closer we get to the storm and the ETA, so to speak, the more scattered these models were in their positioning as to where this thing was going to go. It's so frustrating sometimes.
And my biggest issue, Bob, you have never heard me say this. Joe has, but one of the things that I've truly discovered, I sort of knew this, but social media has really brought it to the forefront because instead of getting the occasional, or back in the day when you and I go back, pre-email practically to Charlemagne, and you get the phone calls that would come in, and maybe every once in a while you get a letter, snail mail, days or weeks later. And it drives me crazy. People forecast shop, and then they go forecast shopping. They get they get everybody's opinion, and at least back in the day where you only had a handful of weather people that you could, maybe 3 or 4. Now you got like 25 of them, and everybody's forecast shopping. And then your message, Joe and I could have been blue in the face when we talked about the day before Henri saying that the biggest issue with Henri was going to be the rain. As opposed to the wind. It was going to be the rain, and we could have gone on with megaphones announcing this, and we both got blowback, and I blow it right back and say, show me, okay, pull up the quotes. I've got, I must have like 25 articles I've written about this storm. Show me the quotes that said that we were going to get destructive winds. I could show you the quotes, or I could tell you that it says there that the wind was not going to be the issue; it was going to be the rain. But it's almost like you're fighting a lost cause. It seems to get worse, and the only way I justify it now, I know what I did. I mean, I know what I forecast. Joe knows what he forecasts. In our hearts, we know what we said and what's truth and what's not. So it comes with the territory, but it doesn't mean that it's not frustrating, and it doesn't mean you want to sometimes just like bang your head against the wall and say why. But it goes with the territory.
People hear what they want to hear.
Yes, absolutely.
If you say something that they didn't want to hear, then they just tune you out. They don't hear that message. They hear what they want to hear.
And then I'll get the complaints about that. The storm was a bust, and we didn't get this, so we didn't get the winds, we didn't get that, and then I just respond by saying, you know what? I'm terribly sorry that you didn't get the disaster you were looking for, but you know what? Maybe next time, maybe the next one,
next time
we'll blow your house down and wipe you out. So just be patient. It'll happen.
You mentioned something, Joe, that I wanted to go back to on the advisory. What did you read on that advisory? the latitude and the longitude.
Right.
Do you ever see anybody track the latitude and longitude in terms of what it's done advisory to advisory?
Oh, no, nobody does that anymore.
It's moved 2/10 north and 3/10 west.
Nobody does that anymore.
Nobody does that.
No.
And it's like, well, now wait a minute. They have the motion going north, but it went more west than north. Nobody's going to say anything.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're afraid to fail.
Well,
They just don't want to fail, so they don't try.
But it's funny you brought that up, because one of the things that stuck in my mind, Joe Rayo, you remember from last week when we were looking at this in terms of latitude and longitude and trying to figure out, because half the guidance was going, up and left and into New York Harbor, Western Long Island, Sandy Hook, in New Jersey, and that's a Sandy scenario,
Right.
Worst case scenario. But we both pointed out while it was happening, well, there were two things I said. One was, on its way westward, once it gets left of 70, if it gets left of 70 and it's south of 30, you pay attention, okay? And the other thing was that when it was starting to move northeastward, and we came on and we said, this thing's going left of 72. I'm sorry, this thing is going right of 72. If it goes right of 72, it's going to be further east. And it wound up going almost to 70.3 before it started the arc up. And that's what ultimately happened with Henri, was that it went out too far to the east. It eventually went north and then northwest and then west-northwest. But it did that. It did that at like 71.5, 72, and it wound up making the hook westward across Connecticut, and the low center went over into the Catskills. So the models, in a sense, caught the left-handed turn. They just did it too soon. But you're right. You're right about the fact that nobody plots anymore. Nobody gives you any kind of context.
Joe mentioned sectionals.
Yeah.
And the reason we had to do that, Joe Rayo,
Right.
is because we didn't have computer maps. We didn't have anything generated except what we made. You had to plot the data because there was no other way.
Absolutely.
You plotted it, and drew the maps.
Right.
And I know that dates us, but I think it's like it made us better.
It gave us a real feel for what was going on. You got kids today that when stuff is actually going on, they're still looking at, they're looking on their screens.
Right.
And I tell them, I say, if you're, to the young ones, I said, try to at least remember to look out the window while something is going on, so that you can, who cares? You get all worked up, and this is particularly with snowstorms. It's like you get all worked up with snowstorms, and you're still looking on the screen. Look out the window. Just look, at least take some time to appreciate what you've been rooting for months on end. And you finally got the 540 thickness line to behave itself and give you snow instead of snow changing to ice pellets and rain. And you're still there, and you're there watching it on a screen, please. And by the way, speaking of left, I was noticing on the 18Z GFS that it looks like, at least from the standpoint of the GFS, from the prior couple of runs, it's a little bit left, a little bit further to the west.
Not
very
drastic,
much.
Joe.
No, it's small, but it is, it's a handful of miles. And for somebody that, in a situation like this, when you're talking about a really wrapped up, tight animal, 15 miles is going to make a huge difference for one place versus another.
Absolutely.
And Chuck, sorry, go on, Bob.
Well, I was just going to say that's why, in focusing on that Eyewall, it is amazing that the impacts are so vastly different when you go outside. You have to remember the eye might be 20, 25 miles wide, and then on both sides you got maybe another 10, 20 miles. If you can just avoid that 50, 60 miles and have it scoot a little farther away, yeah, you could get some strong tropical storm winds, but it's those hurricane force when most structures are okay up to 100 miles an hour. It's after that's when you have your buildings start to fail. And I'm hearing 140 miles an hour with this storm. That's just in the Eyewall. They make it sound like it's everywhere, and it's not.
Well, we all remember with Katrina, the Superdome, and literally Katrina was literally like peeling off portions of the Superdome. I mean, that I never saw anything like that happen, but that was a pretty impressive thing to see all that. And I'm remembering also all the people that were inside the Superdome while all that was taking place. So can you imagine being in the Superdome and all of a sudden looking up and seeing a whole section of the Superdome suddenly go from dark or grayish color to white because suddenly daylight is being exposed because that one particular section is being peeled off by the winds? That would have scared the heck out of me.
By the way, I'm sorry. Just let me really quick. I just want to say we got 100 likes, which is nice. Thank you for those of you who hit the like button. It'd be great if you could get us to 200 likes, but we certainly appreciate the 100 that we got. And on the poll tonight, because I don't know if you can see it, Bob, but on the chat board, on some nights I put up a poll so that the meteorologists on the chat board can lay their opinion. And I put a simple question: is how strong will Ida get before landfall? Now, notice I didn't say how strong will Ida be at landfall. I said how strong will Ida get before landfall? And 51%, we've got 230 votes, 51% say a Cat 4, 27% say a Cat 5, and 16% say a Cat 3, and 6% of the vote says a Cat 2. So the vast majority say it's a major, and 77% say it's either a 4 or a 5.
Not surprising.
And two things off the chat board quickly. Thank you, Barry Goldberg, for hitting Super Chat tonight for us. We always appreciate it. And Chuck Cardillo asking myself and Bob and you, Joe, is there a chance that this could move off the mid-Atlantic coast and redevelop into a tropical storm? And I know already up here that there are forecasters that are saying, well, we could get a really heavy dose of rain here, courtesy of Ida's remnants, maybe around Thursday or Friday. And I beg to differ on that. I think personally that a lot of the worst, part of the remnants of Ida will probably pass. Well, not probably. Will likely pass south of our New York City metropolitan area. I'm not saying we're not going to get any rain, but if they're thinking about 2, 3, 4 inches, I don't think that's going to happen. And Joe, you were pointing this out last night that come next weekend, that trough will be moving across the northeastern states with a nice flow of air out of Canada, probably the best flow that we've seen in weeks, that northwesterly flow, and that could very well deflect a lot of Ida's potential rain up into our vicinity. I know now some of the models are saying, yeah, we're going to get hammered, but the European is one model that is, again, pushing a lot of that stuff, the heavy duty stuff, off to our south. And remember, folks, we're like 6 days away.
Right.
And so much can happen
in
6 days, especially with a landfalling hurricane and its remnants. You're asking me to bullseye or to look at or make a call now as to where potential heavy flooding rains are going to be? Come on, give me a break.
Look, the other side of that equation, by the way, is the fact that this is going to be up the west side of the Appalachians. So you've got the GFS now, taking a surface low up through West Virginia and through northern New Jersey, and eventually up into southern New Hampshire. Now, if that track is correct, there might be a burst of rain here Tuesday night into Wednesday, but it'll be almost like a warm front coming up, and the bulk of the heavy rain will wind up going west of the mountains over West Virginia, central and western PA. Maybe where Chuck is up in the Catskills, but it'll be all there north and west and go up into New England. So, I mean, as far as it turning east, now, Camille, as I recall, actually did that. It turned east, and of course they had 30-inch rains in the Central Appalachians from that, which were incredibly destructive. And then it moved off the Virginia coast and took off like a rocket ship to the northeast and wound up, I think it wound up re-strengthening into a minimal hurricane before it went to the Atlantic graveyard. But yeah, Joe, that upper trough that's going to be swinging out of Canada and swinging eastward, if that comes in faster and flattens the flow, then yeah, most of the rain could wind up going to our south and going underneath us and crossing through the mid-Atlantic states. If it takes longer, if the trough gets hung up, then you might split the difference and get a soaking rain that run. It almost looks like it looks like an autumn frontal wave, a deepening low on a front, because you've got this big upper trough that's swinging down from the Great Lakes with this gorgeous 10, almost, what is that, a 1030 high? I can't see. I know it's a 1021 or 2 high. But there's a nice high and a nice shot of dry air that comes into the end of next week and into the Labor Day weekend. We can only hope and pray to get those 40 dew points down to the Mid-Atlantic states. Yeah, it's too soon. It's just too soon to figure out.
Didn't the spaghetti plot map that you were showing a few minutes ago have most of the models taking the what's left of the center and curving it off to the right, off of, let's say, the Mid-Atlantic coast? As opposed to
one goes up cuts West Virginia from west to east, and then it just sort of disappears because the geography doesn't go far enough north. But the ones that make it that far north actually turn it east and then southeast in North Carolina and offshore. Now that says to me that the northern trough just basically comes in and overwhelms everything, and the westerlies drop all the way down. That's what. At least those models, that's what they're probably seeing in their upper air.
See, guys, once a storm leaves us down here, I never even follow it. So it's like, you're asking me, what do you think? What? I don't care. It's gone from us. I'm looking out for the south. So it's like, I don't know. I just don't know what happens in storms once they leave us here, because we spent so many days focused on watching this monster come in that once it's gone, we kind of, and it's somebody else's problem.
And Bob, your part of the country sets the stage for us. They will show you, or they will show us, all of the local TV stations. They're 5 or 6 o'clock. Sometimes it's as early as 4 o'clock news up here now, or the 10 and 11 o'clock news. They'll show you the destruction, let's say, of the Gulf Coast. They'll show trees down. They'll show people walking around like zombies in the street. They'll show 3-foot flooding waves on Main Street. And then they'll come back to the anchors at the desk and say, is this going to be our concern in the next day or two? We'll have the forecast. And immediately you're not leaving the TV set. You're glued there waiting to see whether or not what you just saw down in Louisiana and Mississippi is heading this way for us. Now, we know that would not be the case up here, but still, they make it look like, or they'll simply say, Ida is coming our way now. What does she mean for us? That kind of thing. It's incredible the tricks that these media people use to get you to continue to watch a specific channel up here.
I have go ahead, Bob.
The ones I like, guys, and you've seen it happen time and again. It just happened with Stephanie Abrams, and I love Stephanie. I think she is great. But she was, I think, at Montauk or the Hamptons. She was up there for Henri, and she said, well, they just closed the beach here, and nobody can go on because it's getting too dangerous. And while she's on camera,
nobody can go on the beach because it's too darn expensive.
These 2 girls in bikinis are walking up the walkway. Well, she's saying the beach has been closed. And it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, that happens far too often. Far too often. What was the one, Joe, with the guy was like standing in the wind or something, or pretending to stand in the wind, and then there was somebody else in the background that was just, like
dancing around.
Yeah, dancing around like nothing was happening. We do have Brandon Doherty hit Super Chat. I don't know if we mentioned that earlier, so thank you, Brandon. Um, it's very hard to zip code forecast, as I like to call it. But I just got it. There's a couple of folks on the chat board. Owen Sullivan says in 2016, we saw 20 inches of rainfall in East Baton Rouge over 3 days that caused historic flooding in the state. Ida looks like it will drop just as much rain, but in less time. So, I mean, it's hard. I would just, my own opinion is, it's hard to put a top number. I would think that you probably could get at least you probably could wind up with a foot of rain out of this. Now, whether it winds up being, 20 inches or not, I don't know. But
depends on the speed, Joe. Just what you said about the Baton Rouge storm, that was moving very slowly. If this one maintains a good forward motion, I think that 15 to 20 inches is way too high.
Way too
I
high.
think you're right. It might be more like 8 to 12. And stretched over a couple of days, that should not be a major issue.
Mary, forgive me if I mispronounce this. It's not Ponchatoula. It's Mary Abadie. Abadi.
Like Ebony.
Ebony. Okay, so she wants to know from you, Bob, what's going to happen. What is Marrero going to get?
Marrero. For those of you who don't know, it's on the West Bank, across the river. I'm on the East Bank. Marrero is going to be almost like the city of New Orleans. We're going to get a number of rain squalls. I just said 8 to 12 inches, I think, is a good top number. And probably have wind gusts up to 75. Wind gusts now. I didn't say sustained. Wind gusts to 75. That can bring down some tree limbs, power outages. I think that's going to be the worst of it for New Orleans. The power outages at this time of the year, once the storm passes, it'll be back up to 90 with humidity and no power, no AC. That's brutal.
Dan Smith says, why no Cat 6? And then he kind of answers his own question, unless he was answering somebody else's question that brought it up. It says, probably because hurricanes significantly higher than a Cat 5 minimums wind speeds are super rare. It's more of a guide for public communication than a real discussion. That plus the fact that when you read the definition of a Category 5 hurricane, it says catastrophic destruction. So I can't imagine, well, what is above catastrophic destruction? Disintegration? I mean, so I mean, you're already kind of saying that the 5 is, basically wiping everything out. So there really isn't any reason to put another number on it. We've already taken it to its natural apocalyptic conclusion. By the way, we should point out that, at least locally, let's just bear with us, Bob. Just want to do just a quick local check here, because we've had some showers and thunderstorms tonight, and we've had the ton of rain we got from Henri has left a lot of areas susceptible to flash flooding. A little renegade band that moved across northern New Jersey to about New York City and actually across the South Shore of Long Island. That's all but fallen apart. But there are other storms now over the Catskills and in eastern Pennsylvania, up and down eastern Pennsylvania. Looks like along and east of 81. And there are a few flash flood warnings that are up at the moment. And we had well, that's my dog that just barked. We had he's been asleep all this time. The show knocked him out, but he probably heard a rabbit move. We've got some severe thunderstorms in Chesapeake Bay moving onto the Delmarva Peninsula, but those storms have kind of started to fizzle a little bit. There's one solid cell on the southern end of that looks pretty healthy. Down your way, Mr. Breck, there's some showers and storms off the Louisiana coast. Probably.
You notice that little swirl?
Which little swirl? Oh, the swirl down over by the Keys.
No.
Where?
Just south of Houma.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Right in there. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. People, they won't. It's there. I see it at home, but there's some rain on radar. Wait, there's a swirl. They won't point things out. I don't know what it is. I think it goes back to mentoring. Now, I just remember, Joe, I wanted you to help me forecast. It wasn't like Joe, you just go do your thing and I do my
Right,
thing.
right.
No, I tried to get you involved, shared my knowledge, wanted you to share because you were fresh out of school,
Hmm.
and I wanted to know what you knew. And I think the kids nowadays they don't mentor each other.
No, they already know everything. I've really noticed that the young. I got to say this. Now, I always when I worked at Pix and had my producer Mike Leona, who's my good buddy. I mean, we always did things, and he wasn't on camera at Pix, but we always did the forecasting together. And yeah, you learn things. That's how I learned. I mean, I learned from you. I learned from Alan when I worked with Alan Casper. There's a few people I didn't learn anything from, but but we could go down that we could have that conversation one day when
Yeah, a couple of
when they've left this earth.
guineas in at some bar in the. Yeah, I never forget my trip up for your wedding, Joe. That was a blast. You, in fact, Joe mentioned White Plains, and isn't that where your parents lived?
South of White Plains in Scarsdale, yeah.
Okay, it's somewhere up there, and it was like and then we went to the church was it in the Bronx or was
the church was in the Bronx, Holy Rosary.
Yeah. And then when we went across the George Washington Bridge to the you told me you can't miss a New York Italian wedding, and it was spectacular.
Yeah, we went to Jersey. We had the reception was in the Manor in West Orange, New Jersey.
That was a great time.
It really was. I'm so glad you came. And we had a blast. It really was a lot of fun. You can't miss it. You can't miss an Italian wedding.
I wanted to be your mentor. I trust that you went on and you mentored other people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what we should do as you get older and gain more experience. Share it.
One of the things that I take a lot of pride in is the fact that a number of I don't even want to say it because I'm not trying to come across as this the big deal here, but I always made it a point whenever I had interns over the years to give them everything that I could and give them every opportunity that I could give them and or orchestrate for them, because it was a lot tougher to get on the air back in the day than it is now. And a lot of these people, couldn't get anybody to give them an air break. I always made sure I went out of my way to help them. And I will tell you this. I'm not going to say who this is. Joe, you could guess who this is, but please don't say it, okay? But
oh, say it.
No, I don't want to say it because I don't want to even wait. Give this person the time of day. But he would ask anyone that was being hired for a producer's job if they had any inkling for being on the air, and if they answered that question yes, he would go into management and say, "You are not to hire this person." And these were young kids, trying to get their foot in the door someplace.
Sure.
So what I used to do was I used to find out who was being interviewed ahead of time. And, everybody kind of knows everybody in the world. They're in the weather world. It's a small world. And I would get a hold of them and I would tell them. And Jeff Banson could verify this. And he's not the only one. I said, when you get asked that question that you want to be on the air, you are to respond by saying, absolutely not. I have absolutely no desire to get on the air. And, that was their answer to get, because then they got hired, because they needed somebody to produce. And then I would take them on the weekends when I had them on the weekends, and I would, we had 5 hours in between newscasts, so I would just get the camera, running and get them recording in the back, and they get all the airtime they wanted. And you know,
That's what it should be.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think it just doesn't happen anymore. I don't think it happened. These kids come out of school now, you know, they have brought. My daughter went to Stony Brook, and the broadcast setup that they had at Stony Brook University was every bit as good as a medium-sized market television station, and even better. They actually had equipment. This was back maybe about 10 or 11 years ago. They had computer equipment, and they had Macs and all sorts of stuff like that. And they were doing things that the stations here in the #1 market weren't doing because they didn't have the technology yet. So they come out very seasoned from they come out
no longer raw.
Right. They're not raw. They're not green. They come out very seasoned and relatively polished air-wise, but they're very mechanical.
Joe, before we leave, I got to get in my little plug. There's me in my ute.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Good Lord.
Me in my ute.
In your ute.
How about that?
Yeah, I remember. Bob, I hate to say, I hate to bring this up, but I
I'll bring it up.
Well, let's just say that was a time, I guess, in the back in the mid '80s. You didn't have many people on air that, how shall we say, had receding hairlines. So
receding. I had receding. You know, the funny thing.
I know you could park a car up there, for God's sake.
I wore, and this started back in Dayton, Ohio, in 1977, when Johnny Bench was doing a fashion show as the MC, and I'm working in Dayton, and I'm modeling for some outfit, and walking down the runway, and he says, "Hi, and Bob's modeling such and such," and he says, "Oh, geez, Breck, I'm noticing getting a little sparse on top there, huh?" And it hit me that I got to do something if I'm going to stay in the business. So I said, I got to get a hairpiece. So I went out and I got a hairpiece in Dayton, and I had hairpieces from age 28 until 68. I retired at age 68, and the last thing I did before I retired, we had a unveiling party on the air, and I put the hairpiece on the receding anchorman's head, and the viewers
how funny that must have been.
He looks darn good, and it was it's what you did to stay alive.
Oh, I remember. I worked with Willard Scott for 2 years back in 1980 to 82. I mean, that was part of the routine.
Willard did the same thing.
Yeah. He finally just said, to hell with it. I'm not wearing this piece anymore.
Willard's still living. He's got to be 90-ish or something.
I think so. I think so. I'm going to guess that he's on his farm in Virginia, which I got to visit once when I had to go with him to D.C. during the Reagan inauguration. It was a beautiful farm. He had his own. What do they call? I forgot what they call it, where you cure the meat. You slaughter your pig and then you kind of hang everything out in there. It was a beautiful, beautiful farmhouse that he had out there. It's been, oh God, I got to say, probably a good 20, 25 years since I last spoke to him, maybe even longer than that. But I hope if he gets wind of this, Tom Willard, and I hope you're well and miss you. Had a lot of fun with him. Willard Scott taught me quite a bit. From at least as much as what we always have, we look at, you talk about the weather part of it, but because we didn't have the broadcasting facilities in the schools when we went, and he exposed me to the showman part of it. Because it's show business. I mean, it is. Politics is show business for ugly people. We are not ugly, thankfully. But he taught me the showman part of it, and that's very important when it comes to TV.
My Colorado son just pinged me. He's watching from Colorado, and he said he was able to look.
Is this? I'm sorry. Is this Justin?
No, Justin is in Oklahoma.
Justin is Oklahoma.
Rob is in Colorado, Longmont, outside of Boulder.
Okay.
And he says Willard is 87 years old.
Oh wow! God bless.
Yeah.
God bless.
Good luck to him. Enjoy life, Willard.
Hey, Bob, on our chat board, we have Kristen Shelby, and she writes, from New Orleans, 22, if I see Bob Breck on TV twitch his suit off and he looks stressed, then I'm stressed. If he's calm, I'm calm. Did you take your suit off sometimes or during your...
I think they're embellishing it a little bit. I might have taken my coat off, kind of like a coach in a highly contested game where he's gotten a referee a bad call, and it's I might have taken the coat off. And
so you didn't roll up your sleeves then? That's
we have a...
That's not now, Joe. You know how close Lonnie and I are, so.
Yeah, well, that's the signal when Lonnie and I one of my former coworkers at News 12, who's now works with Lonnie at Channel 2 here in New York, said they've actually had corporate meetings about this, about when it's time for Lonnie to take off his jacket, when it's time for him to roll his sleeves up.
No.
You know, these are various little symbols as to, or signals to the viewers without him even saying a word. Just look at the way Lonnie is dressed in front of the green screen or the green wall, and you know how bad the situation is going to be. It's incredible.
By the way, I got the 0Z hurricane model track plots are out. Okay, so let me bring them up. And I just noticed that. All right, give me 1 second here. I gotta see, Bob. Now, I'm actually working a switcher, so I'm directing this. I'm doing audio.
I hope this. I'm going to try and pull up those on my computer here since it's Windows. I don't know if it's going to cover up what I'm.
It probably
won't hurt anything.
No, I have them up on the screen, so it won't. As long as you don't close your Zoom window, you're fine. It looked like there's a little more spread on this run. I would say, just kind of eyeballing it, that it looks like they're a little more spread out, and the main cluster of models. See, maybe they've come a shade to the right on this one. If you take the easternmost track is Boothville into the Pearl River, or just west of the Pearl River in Mississippi. Okay. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's probably right on the Mississippi-Louisiana state line. Okay, that's the easternmost model track. The westernmost is, west of Lafayette, and all the other ones are kind of clustered in the middle. So, I mean, if you want to draw a mean, I don't know, maybe 50 miles west of 25 to 50 miles west of Baton Rouge. I mean, still goes west of New Orleans. But I think the tracks maybe came a little bit to the right on this run. And Joe,
again, that's model run, Joe. This thing's not even offshore yet.
Right.
I think we're going to see some changes. The idea that I keep hearing the models have been consistent. Well, I think you're going to see there's going to be a time.
Well, let's remember one thing they also said, and they said it on the last couple of discussions, noting that the center was a little bit to the right than what they thought it was. Okay, so might want to be careful about that too. That perhaps, the models may be consistent to the left, but they've been talking about the fact that this thing, the center of this, has been a little bit to the right on satellite and recon plots. So anyway, I just put that out there. And for Joe Rayo, by the way, on this particular run, the ones that go out far enough take it
toward New York.
Okay, So that would put in the argument for a soaking rain, which is kind of what I just said, that we could get a soaking rain on Wednesday. I don't know what they're talking about Friday. I thought it would probably
Like
be
you
Wednesday.
need
Yeah, I know. And on the intensity models, they've actually backed off a little bit. You have a couple of them. There's 1, 2, 3 of them now that only get it to a Cat 4. The vast majority of it get in that Cat 3 zone. So so the intensity models have come off a bit from the prior run. So we'll see if that verifies or not. Obviously, the key is once it gets into the Gulf, at this if it's supposed to start strengthening rapidly during the day. Once it moves far enough off the coast of Cuba, we'll see if that strengthening does wind up materializing. So Bob, let me ask you this, because we do live in a world that is, our world that we worked in, because the 3 of us now are all, we're all on our own. But you left as social media was really just kind of taking over everything. And I'm just kind of curious as to how you feel about what you think about all of that.
social media is why I left. The station was wanting us to do so many Facebook posts a day, wanting us to do, they were just coming out with these Instagrams and Twitter, and it was like, how am I going to do my school talks? How am I going to do my service club talks? How am I going to go and even do weather when you're having me do all these social media posts? And it was like, you need to interact with your viewers. And I said, frankly, there's some viewers out there I don't want to interact with. I built my reputation by meeting them face to face. So I just didn't like the social media thing. And I went to management and asked them if I could have out of my last year of the contract. And they were very generous. They were super about it. They understood. A lot of people that have been with me all these years, they know I had 2 health scares. I had prostate cancer and I had a pacemaker. And there was a book put out by a guy at ABC in New York, When God Winks. I don't know if you ever heard about this. This is a very famous guy with ABC Channel 7 in New York. I don't know if he was the general manager or he was high up. And he put out When God Winks. And it's like, hey, God was winking at me, gave you 2 health scares. Maybe it's telling you something that you ought to get out and stop and smell the roses. So essentially, that's what I chose. I don't regret it. I've had a ball for 5 years. I enjoyed doing the blog because I think I still can story tell, which
Right.
is something clearly that's lacking. Although we do have a couple, I've got a couple of people in this market that are good. They're not bad. We have some good weather presenters in New Orleans. That's why I'm thinking this community is not going to be caught off guard. We will be prepared. We've been through these before, and we're going to survive this again. It's not going to be a Katrina unless it does something stupid and changes course and that Eyewall comes over us. I don't think that's going to happen.
Mr. Rayo, anything
Any
you want to add to
closing
that?
thoughts,
No.
Joe? Come on, speak up.
Hold on.
Don't hold it back in.
I'm typing.
I'm just thinking about the fact that a colleague of mine said, Joe, when you're out of the 25 to 54 demographic, which is what the corporate people in TV like to look at, and once you're out of that bracket, once you're above 54 years old, if you still manage to still have a job, then you are considered by the corporate hierarchy to be an albatross, because they look at you and they say, this guy, he's been around for a very long time, and he may have a lot of people who admire him, but he's making a ton of money. And we probably could get somebody in there who looks a lot prettier and also is a lot younger and also will probably ask for a lot less money than what this guy is asking for. And probably when you reach, your late 50s or 60s, it might be time to, as you just said, Bob, God winking at you a couple of times, but for other reasons too. The bell might be ringing saying, you know, you had a good career, you highly respected, but now get out.
Bob,
And
by the
that
way,
basically that's the story about television today.
Bob, by the way, it's bobbreck.blogspot.com is your blog.
Well, all you have to do is go to, that might be, everybody on their phone, Joe, Google
Yes.
and just talk into it.
But
Bob Breck blog.
right, but
Bob Breck blog.
I just put the link up on the chat board because somebody asked, and you know, we do have a few people that, you know, are still on a rotary telephone. So let's just, you know, just to let you know.
Really?
We won't say whom.
Shut up, Joe.
Should I bring up a picture of the Joe Radio cell phone?
Not a flip phone now.
No, he's not. He's off the flip phone. Someone, is it Stephanie Young, says, Bob, before you go, could you just give your final thoughts? And I'll read you word for word what she says. Could you please give us your final thoughts? Should we pack? Well, she said should be packed, but I think she means should we pack or not in New Orleans?
Let's put it this way. Unless there's a turn back to the east, I'm feeling real good for the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I'm feeling decent for most of St. Tammany, most of Jefferson and New Orleans, which is Metairie, New Orleans. I'm concerned Plaquemines, they're going to have a big storm surge. They're going to have a big storm surge, and that's going to put water over the roadways. And but they've already been told they know they got to get out. It's low. You head farther westward and you start going back towards the Eyewall. That's where my concern is. So unless there's a shift back to the east, as I said before, I think we're going to have our biggest thing inside the levee protection is the power outages. And if I had relatives to the east that I could go visit for a couple of days so that you're not here without air conditioning, I'd do it. But my reluctance to leave right now is there. Now, as Joe pointed out, though, this could be a 175-mile-an-hour storm tomorrow. That would change the thinking some if it blew up beyond what even the Hurricane Center suggested. So I think it's clearly still evolving, and there's usually nothing about meteorology that's certain. And that's why they call it, you know, the cone of uncertainty. When
Yes.
in fact, it's the cone of error.
People need to, you know, and I've said this to folks when I get into this conversation. You know, you need to accept the fact that meteorology is, you know, people say it's not an exact science. I take some issue with that, phrasing it that way. What I like to say is it's a fluid science. Okay, that what we do is we forecast. We not only have to forecast change, but we have to forecast the change of the change, and we have to forecast the change of the change for every single molecule, effectively, every single molecule of air that's in the atmosphere, covering the entire globe. Because if one of those things changes differently than what you anticipate, it's going to change everything else downstream. And people need to accept that. They're not going to get certitude from us until something is actually happening. And even then, we have to always leave a little opening just in case. But that's just the nature of what we do. And it's a fluid science, and people need to be fluid. How's that?
I like that. I
You
like
know?
that.
And
Well, gentlemen, you two have been a joy tonight. You know, I don't want to say I miss the Northeast, but I do miss the Northeast. I visited New York City a couple of times. Broadway's about to reopen.
supposedly,
Had a wonderful couple Broadway shows, which you can't get down south. So we have local theater, but there's they're not Broadway productions.
Well, you know
Yeah.
what? They may not be Broadway productions, but when they're Broadway productions, it's $300 or $400 a seat.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
In,
You know, they go on
in,
tour. We do get those, and it's
in
it's pretty close.
in very narrow seats. Okay,
Yeah.
they made the seats like they did in airplanes. They made them narrow. I mean, so that they could squeeze in an extra, 20 or 30 people. So it's not everything it's cracked up to be.
Well, gentlemen, I hope you follow my blog. I'll be
Well, yeah, it's
trying to keep up with the storm.
I did bring it up. I put it on the chat board. It's bobbreck.blogspot.com. And I see your last blog was from today about nearing decision time to stay or leave, your latest article. So definitely, by all means, link
Joe,
that.
have you
link to
made-
that
You have a lot
blog.
of graphics on your blog. I noticed, Bob, and it must be nice to be able to have the time to look at each graphic, to consider where they're going to go, whatever like that, put them on, instead of having an executive producer leaning over your shoulder and saying, Bob, we need you in the studio right now. When you come back, we want you to put 3 more things up on Twitter and everything else. It must be nice to not have to answer to anybody, to be able to do it on your own, at your own pace and at your own time, as opposed to, being back and having somebody scream at you from 3 different directions or whatever, especially in a power pack, pressure pack situation like what's about to unfold or is unfolding right now down in your neck of the woods.
Well, it's the no stress job when you can stay at home, get a good night's sleep, and
True.
get up and go back on the computer. It
And you
sure
don't have
beats-
to, drive in traffic.
you don't have to.
Toward the end of my stretch here, I was driving 62 miles each way to get to work.
Yeah,
Okay.
I couldn't believe he did that.
62 miles in a Toyota that had 200. When I bought my new truck, my Toyota finished with 960 miles, and I didn't want to drive it the last 40 because I just had this. I was just in fear that the thing would fall apart and I would be in it. So I just said, you know what? For all intents and purposes, I went 300,000, even if it didn't really click on the odometer. I just want to tell you about. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. You are certainly, whenever you feel the need, just let me know. And you have an open door here if you'd like to come on and talk weather or talk whatever.
Joe, did you make 200 likes yet?
Did we get to 2? I don't think so because I didn't.
166.
I didn't.
166.
I didn't hawk the 200 likes after that one mention. 165 is what I have. You said, Joe, it's 166.
166.
Yeah, because usually one of my regulars is usually on the chat board is usually helping us hawk the likes, but he's not on tonight. Steve LaPointe, God bless him. I hope he's feeling good.
Well, we could do it just as easy as I think. We have 283 people watching right now. We're 29 away from 200. Folks, now does it sound like a telethon? Folks, we're going off the air in a couple of minutes. We need your support.
That's right.
Please hit that like button right now. Let's make it to 200 before we go off the air. And
It's for the children.
It's for the children.
Oh, God.
You may be laughing, guys, but now it's jumped up to 184. It's moving like right before my eyes now. 186.
27.
I think we're gonna hit it. I think we're gonna hit 200, ladies and gentlemen. And before you go
tonight, if we don't.
193. I'm not the. Joe's better at this, the telethon part of it than I am.
look at us, we're walking.
Oh,
Look at us.
stop it.
No.
Stop it. 198. Come on. And there'll be the joker that'll hit 200 and then he'll unlike it. So it'll go back down to 199.
200.
201. Okay. Add that a little so that we can be safe.
And Randy Richardson says, wait, don't go, Bob. Should we be concerned about major power outages and flooding around, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Metairie? M-E-T-A?
Metairie.
Yes.
Well, you know what you're talking
Metairie.
about.
I lived in Metairie.
All
Power
right.
outages. Yes. That's going to be a big concern. Without power for maybe days, that could happen. Again, it's going to depend where that eyewall. Keep it away, things won't be so bad.
Sandy,
it's gonna be a
Sandy
close call,
Alvarado
guys.
says we love you, Bob. Bob.
Well, thank you, girl. It's
And
going to be a close call. That's all. It's not going to be cut and dried probably till it gets to the coast.
a big thank you, by the way, too, to those of you that from Southeast Louisiana. I lived there for 3 years. It was just an absolutely wonderful experience living in New Orleans. I loved every minute of it. One of these days I'm going to take a trip back. I've never gone back, and now that I'm within driving distance, one of these days, well, I'm not now. I'm up on Long Island, but when I'm down in Georgia, one of these days I'm going to just jump in the truck and drive down. And Bob, if you're up in in North Georgia, if you come up to Atlanta, let me.
Good friends in Atlanta.
All right. Well, let me
Give me a
know.
call.
I'm less than 2 hours from Atlanta, and I'll definitely come down, or you can come up to the mountains and you know, fish for trout, because I got a river 300 yards from my house that's stocked with trout.
Oh, how lovely.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of fun. All right. Thanks everybody
Thank
for
you,
being.
guys.
Thank you, Bob. You can go ahead and go to turn off, or if you want to wait for me afterward, that's up to you. But I just want to tell everybody that Joe, we figured out tomorrow night what time we're going to do this.
I'm going into the Bronx tomorrow night, Joe, to visit my mummy.
Oh, give her my best.
So let's see, at 9 o'clock. Does that sound?
9 o'clock works for me. I'm going to be at Mother's tomorrow too, but I'll be up in Scarsdale to the north.
Okay.
So we'll go at 9 o'clock's fine.
Hey, if you want to get in your car, I'll get coming back from Mom's. I'll meet you on 287 somewhere.
We'll just do it from an overpass.
Yes, exactly.
Sure, of course.
You guys keep having fun, because I know you enjoy doing these things, and I've had fun doing it with you.
Thanks, Bob. Like I said,
Thank you.
If you ever want to do it again, just let me know. If another hurricane comes, I'll reach out to you. We can have you on.
It could happen. I hate to say it. It could happen.
Yep.
Maybe you want to come back for the post-mortem early next week.
Well, we could do that. If you want to do that, we could do that. We got the 200. That's all that I care.
That's all that matters. Okay, very good. All right. Thanks.
See you, Joe and Joe.
Good night, Bob.
Bye.
Mr. Rayo, all right, so let's shoot for 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. Thanks, everyone. Those of you who hit Super Chat tonight. It was Barry Goldberg, Brandon Doherty, I think, hitting Super Chat. So most appreciated when you bang the tip jar. The 217 of you that hit the like button, thank you very much. And for those of you who hung out for the entire 1 hour and... oh boy, 1 hour and 41 minutes. Thank you.
That's a pretty good show.
Yes. Thank you. All right, so we'll see you tomorrow night. Night, everybody.
Nighty night.